Hello YouTube. Welcome back to Nutkin Farm, or almost Nutkin Farm. When I arrived here today, I saw my neighbour's place looked a little bit different, and I stuck my head in the gate and saw that they had been working on something that they'd been meaning to do for quite a while, and that is get rid of a bunch of camphor laurel trees from their property. And in the Northern Rivers, as you drive around, there are often whole corridors of camphor laurel trees that are seeded all too easily in the Australian environment. I'm told they're a native of China, but they grow particularly well here in our volcanic soil, and the birds help by taking the berries or seeds and spreading them. And as you can see from the stumps, they can form quite a thicket over time if you let them. And those trees eventually rob the light from other species, and while they do provide some habitat for creatures, it's not really the native home of anything, particularly if you're trying to encourage koalas like my neighbours are doing. They're planting some koala food trees, and it's a very admirable effort. But there's a whole lot of, at least when they do the initial cutting, it looks a little bit desolate, doesn't it? That all these very large, magnificent trees have come down. And of course the question is, where did they go? Because there aren't any logs anywhere. Well, let me give you a hint. Over here is a Vermeer chipper. Vermeer is the brand, probably the most popular brand I've seen of a chipper near here. It takes great big branches in through this end, which is closed at the moment, and spits them out the other end. And you can see in this truck, it's absolutely full to the brim of wood chips. Now, I don't know how many trees that load of wood chip represents, but let me show you the rest of it. And here it is, a great big mound of wood chip. I think the darker colour one is a tree that had been poisoned earlier, or trees that had been poisoned earlier, and the lighter one is the live or chip from the recently felled green trees. And it's a great big pile. There's my quad bike, so it's well and truly almost double the height of the quad bike and several times its length, just on the border of Nutkin Farm and my neighbour's property. And it smells like a mothball, this camphor. It really is. And you come up close to it, it's quite finely ground chip. Right? None of this would necessarily get in the way of a harvester or anything, particularly after it breaks down a bit. And look, I wouldn't put camphor laurel chip on my orchard necessarily, and I think my gut instinct is that the oil in camphor laurel is something that might not be good for beneficial microbes. But wood chip in general is an excellent thing to put under your trees. Now, why is that? Because you think, well, wood chip, what's it rich in terms of nutrients? And the answer is not much. It's cellulose, it's wood, it's something that sort of breaks down, and it's largely carbon. Now, you could argue that carbon isn't really a big sort of nutrient for trees in the scheme of things. However, there's a ratio of what's called carbon to nitrogen, which is a very important thing in agronomy of macadamia trees. And if you get the ratio of carbon to nitrogen right, then the way the tree uses nitrogen and carbon in making its own sort of trunks and its own stems and everything can be very beneficial, and it can contribute to what's called soil carbon. Now, adding this to the soil doesn't make soil carbon. It's not, soil carbon isn't that simple. Soil carbon is actually only made by microbes, but the microbes need something to work on. And wood chip is one of those things that macadamia farmers do use under their trees to cover up root exposure in particular, so combat erosion. And so commercially, depending on what your agronomist recommends, it's usually not pure wood chip, and you can use pure wood chip, don't get me wrong, but you then need to supplement some nitrogen so that you haven't got a bit of an imbalance. Often it's sold to you as a combination of cow manure in a certain percentage and wood chip in a certain percentage. The advantages of that are one, the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Two, as the manure decomposes, it has something to hold it together, that is the wood chip. And then, you've got a very long-lasting fertiliser combination then, in which the decaying manure works on the decaying wood chip, and you end up creating a very nice, springy soil surface, and something that's, that the worms like and that feeder roots of trees get into. Now, this is something you'll never get from a granular fertiliser, of course, because a granular fertiliser will just sit on whatever soil you're giving it, and it may get into the soil. It often does get into the soil, but in terms of a lasting benefit, well, not so much. Now, the reason for showing you this wood chip, of course, is that this is what you can end up with when you do selective row removal as a form of rehabilitation, or even pruning. You come along and do the chipping, you end up with a material like that. And the chipper I just showed you over there is something that can go along rows of macadamia trees. And if you are good, you can do it with a separate operator. So someone prunes the trees, someone feeds them into the chipper. But there are even advanced models now where an excavator can drag a chipper behind it, and the excavator operator, as a single person, can chop the tall trees down, chop the big branches down, and the grabber on the end of the excavator can at the same time feed the chipper. The chipper then sprays its chip out under the tree line, which is where you want the chip to go. The alternative way of doing that, which is potentially cheaper, is to do your pruning and then have what's called a forestry mulcher, which is a great big machine looking like it's from a horror movie, come along and run over the branches. It chops them up in a very crude way, nothing like the wood chip you're seeing here, which is really quite fine. It chops up the branches, but in general, that chip that it makes is a bit large to break down quickly, and also the prunings have to be in the middle of a row of macadamias, so you're not really getting the chip under the roots, you're getting it in the middle of the row, meaning that if you want to redistribute that chip later, that's a separate cost and something you need to handle down the track. Wood chip is controversial in some way, in the sense that, obviously this is all living material, and cutting down trees to make wood chip for other trees isn't necessarily a carbon neutral way of thinking about things. But where tree material is unwanted, such as this, and it can be put to good use fertilising trees that are wanted and creating new growth, really the loss isn't that great. And here in the Northern Rivers, camphor laurel is a noxious pest, a declared noxious pest anyway, except in sort of public areas where the trees have been around for years, and then they're kept as a public good. So chipping, guys, something to consider, and probably the best way to rehabilitate the soil underneath your trees. This is one way of doing it. Like I said, there are others, and perhaps the best material for a macadamia tree is chipped from a macadamia tree, but gosh, you wouldn't say no to this potential source of soil carbon. That's all for me now, apart from just a welcome to a lot of my new subscribers. I do get alerts when I get new subscribers, and I have about 700 of you now, and that's about 680 more than I thought I would have. So many of my new subscribers are from India. I don't know whether that's in response to the marketing effort going on there, but most of you are very polite and very quiet, and I would like to give you a personal welcome to my channel. Please feel free to speak up and tell me anything that you would like to see about macadamias, particularly if you're new to them and you're curious and my existing videos don't answer the questions in your minds. Absolutely love to do that. And finally, on the macadamia price crash, I don't want to dwell on it, but thanks to Bruce Chester, I received one other offer from a macadamia processor offering $1.85 a kilo, which is the highest price I have seen for this year. I want to acknowledge a couple of South African subscribers who've been in touch with me, one directly and one in the comments. I am sorry, I need to specify that when I speak currency on my videos, I mean Australian dollars. Sometimes I forget people are overseas looking at these things. I'm glad that you do. And look, also thank you for your well wishes and for telling me that the South African industry is going through just as much pain as the Australian one is at the moment. And I think, judging by the feedback, pain shared is pain lessened. Again, greetings to you all in South Africa. Love your work. Hope you love ours. And I look at macadamia videos from South Africa and Africa generally with a lot of interest, because it's just a great perspective to have. Anyway, that's it from me. I will see you again soon and give you another update. Bye for now.